Hey guys, I don't normally do this type of stuff, but I thought it would be interesting if I talked about this Learning with Pibby Iceberg. I know lots of people make iceberg videos and they are very fun to watch, so I figured I'd make one on one of my most special interests. The way it works is that on the top layer you've got the most well-known things, and as you go down they get less and less well-known. One thing I should note here is that as of when I'm recording this video and when this iceberg is made, Pibby hasn't been greenlit yet, so if Pibby gets greenlit anytime soon and you're watching this is probably all gonna be incredibly outdated. At least I hope this becomes incredibly outdated. For now, here's all this stuff about Pibby. In the top layer where you've got the sky, there is the pilot. And the pilot is the original 2-minute short that introduced everyone to Pibby. It's a 2-minute trailer. It introduces everyone to the premise of the show, the darkness, all the main characters. Really, if you know what Pibby is, then you already know what this is, so I don't need to explain this for too long. The darkness, or the glitch, it's this black stuff that corrupts everyone, and it is probably the most iconic thing about Pibby besides Pibby herself, and it is the main antagonistic force that Pibby has to fight against. And not a whole lot is known about the darkness, where its origins come from, so there's a lot of speculation about all this. Next we've got Bun Bun. Bun Bun is Pibby's best friend, probably the most iconic character besides Pibby and the darkness. And he starts off as sort of Pibby's little sidekick, kind of like what Boots is to Dora the Explorer. Only he gets corrupted by the darkness and effectively becomes the darkness's main pawn. And so Pibby tries to save Bun Bun from the darkness, but she has to fight Bun Bun in order to do so. I mean, there's not a whole lot I can say here because this is just very basic stuff. So next we've got the Friday Night Funkin' mods. Probably the reason most people outside of the Pibby fandom know what Pibby is, and are probably the most infamous Pibby fan works. For some reason, people who are fans of the rhythm game Friday Night Funkin', which has nothing to do with Pibby, by the way, love to mod corrupted Pibby characters in the game. The premise of these mods is almost always boyfriend goes up against the Pibby corruption and rap battles against all these Pibby corrupted characters. Big characters from the modder's favorite show or something. And there are just so many of these mods that I could talk about them all day, but I'd rather not. So the April Fool's prank. The April Fool's prank is the second official appearance of Pibby. Basically, on April Fool's 2022, Adult Swim did a sort of fake hijacked broadcast where they edit Pibby in the darkness into a bunch of their shows. And they did that for a couple of hours. They did custom bumpers where they edited Pibby in. We now know that a lot of this audio that they use in the April Fool's prank is from the actual pilot of the show, which is just an animatic. It's a full 11-minute pilot, which I'm surprised doesn't get mentioned on this iceberg, but we do have proof that it exists because clips of the pilot animatic have been leaked, and some of the audio from these leaked animatics just happens to match up with the April Fools. And in the animatic, a lot of those lines make a whole lot more sense than they do in the context of the April Fools. So I find it very interesting that they reused audio. The animation seems to be new for that, though.
What's happening? It's a learning opportunity. What's that? What's happening? It's a learning opportunity. Remember, when things seem hard, it's the best time to learn.
So Dodge Greenlee is the creator of Pibby. He's actually still pretty new to the animation industry. This is actually the first show pilot that he's done, to my knowledge. I feel like if he had done any other original pilots or note, I would have heard about him. But he started off working at Nickelodeon. He interned at SpongeBob and then worked on Sanjay and Craig. He was sort of an assistant, very low-level worker on Sanjay and Craig, and he eventually worked up the ranks to the point where on the final episode of Sanjay and Craig, he is a storyboard artist, and he is a storyboarder and writer who also did another Nickelodeon show, Pinky Malinky, before doing a couple of other things. Like, I think he did this one DreamWorks show for a little while, but then he moved to Cartoon Network Studios and worked on Tig and Seek for a while before he created Pibby and pitched it. By the way, the iceberg doesn't mention this. I would put it on there, but Pibby is a character that originated from a D&D campaign he did. He actually posted some concept art of Pibby and the Darkness from that D&D campaign onto Instagram a couple years before the pilot was really a thing. Adult Swim still has a Pibby quote on their Twitter bio. This one's pretty self-explanatory. During the April Fool's prank, Adult Swim changed their Twitter bio. They changed their Twitter bio to let the darkness consume you, and it still says that. They haven't changed it. So there's a lot of speculation on whether that means Pibby is greenlit or not, whether that's still part of the plan. No Pibby news since April Fool's 2022. This is an unfortunate truth. As I'm when I'm making this video, Adult Swim has been radio silent on Pibby, and so has Dodge Greenlee, so we do not know anything about whether it's been greenlit or not. Okay, now going on to the second level, the tip of the iceberg. Nickelodeon references. Okay, this is where it starts to get really interesting. Because Dodge Greenlee used to work at Nickelodeon, there are a couple of references to Nickelodeon shows in the Pibby trailer. The first one is this background of a bus scene, which is very clearly supposed to be Rocco's Modern Life. And the second is very clearly SpongeBob's bathroom. They did a really good job making it the style of the show. But I thought it was a cool way to kind of tease at the idea that other shows could exist in the Pibby universe, besides just Cartoon Network shows. I guess while not going too far legally over the line. So, fan videos based off of Pibby. There are fan edits or YouTube poops of cartoons based on Pibby. This one's pretty self-explanatory. A lot of people like to edit the darkness into cartoon clips. They often call it If the Darkness Took Over, insert something here. And they're basically these straightforward edits where it's like, oh, the darkness is taking over Pibby. But they tend to be very simple and very common, so I don't find them that interesting. I'm sorry if you want me to talk about it more. Disney references. They are a bit more subtle, but there are some Disney references in Pibby as well, especially with Melira. Melira is supposed to be modeled after a Disney villain like Ursula or Cruella de Vil. She might also be based off of Fat Cat from Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. And the background is very reminiscent of Scrooge McDuck's mansion. canceled. I already went over this, but many people question whether Pibby's been canceled or not. I feel this is kind of redundant with the no Pibby news thing, because when there's no news on a pilot for a while, I figure that question is going to be inevitable. Pibby's eye patch. So as the season goes on, and as the progress of the trailer goes on, Pibby's eye gets hurt, and she starts out with this sort of makeshift bandage over it, but eventually somehow she gets an eye patch to cover it properly, and that's probably the most iconic part of Pibby's late season design. The leak. Now this should actually be the leaks plural, and here's why. We have that animatic leak, which I mentioned a while ago. Basically, this person came out of nowhere, said, I have this full 11-minute animatic, left a bunch of cryptic messages on Reddit, and then upload a couple of clips from this animatic, which line up with what we see in the casting call, the darkness being based on internet slang. Another big leak was that the entire animatic for the trailer was leaked. The storyboard for the trailer is mostly the same as the final, but the most interesting difference is that there's some stuff that they had to edit out of the trailer due to copyright. Sailor Moon, Vegeta, He-Man, and Rick from Rick and Morty were edited out of the final trailer. In fact, if you look closely at the final trailer, you can see that Vegeta made it into the animation process, but they had to hastily erase him, I think due to copyright reasons, at the last minute. Okay, so parody characters. It's hard for me to figure out what parody characters means, but I'll just make a wide guess and assume that it means that they mean original characters, like be in the Pibby universe being parodies of other characters, like how Malira is a parody of Disney villains, Alloy Boy is a DC sidekick, and Pibby and Bun Bun are parodies of Dora and Boots. I don't really have a whole lot to say on this. So Pibby April Fools won the Clio Award. So the Clio Awards are these very prestigious awards for advertising, and the Pibby April Fool stunt ended up winning a Clio Award. And it was a top prize, if I remember correctly, because it was such good advertising. Adult Swim even made this whole submission video talking about how big of a deal it was, and showing a lot of Pibby fan videos and fan art, which I found really interesting, because it means Adult Swim is fully aware of the Pibby fandom and how much people out there want Pibby. I just found it really cool, even if the content farms were there as well. Next layer, we're starting to get under the iceberg. The fan base is full of kids. Okay, so there are a lot of kids in the Pibby fan base, even though it's an Adult Swim show. I mean, that's kind of inevitable for all Adult Swim shows. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there were a lot of kids who were into Aqua Teen and Robot Chicken and such. But it especially seems noticeable to a lot of people that the Pibby fan base is full of kids, because they make so many YouTube videos out of it. And it's kind of made the Pibby fans look bad, because they see Pibby fans as being immature for all these kids in the fan base. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. Malira scratched Pibby. This is a fan theory that Malira scratched Pibby's eyes out in the trailer, but we just didn't quite see it, especially since the scene where we first see Malira is where we see the famous scene where Pibby's eye bleeds and she asks what that red water is. It's commonly accepted that that's the reason, although I don't think it's ever officially been confirmed. HBO Max listing. So during the 2022 April Fool's prank, they put the Pibby trailer up on HBO Max and listed it as a trailer, which made a lot of people seem to think that Pibby would be coming soon. Unfortunately, this just turned out to be a red herring. They just had the trailer up for a week and then took it down. During that time, there was a lot of speculation on whether Pibby had been greenlit or not. To be honest, I had kind of forgotten about the whole thing. Now that it's clear in hindsight that this particular one seemed to be a red herring. The Bun Bun Misting poster. Another thing that happened during the April Fool's prank was that Adult Swim's Twitter account, I think their other social medias, and also Dodge Greeley's Instagram put up this poster, which is a mystic poster that Pibby seemingly made with Bun Bun on it. It's hand-drawn as if a kid would draw it, and Bun Bun's eyes are all corrupted. And it talks about how scary the eyes are. I just found it a really cool bit of marketing. Billboards. That's also a good one to mention. The other thing that they did for April Fools was that in Atlanta and Los Angeles, they put up several corrupted billboards which showed an Adult Swim email that had gotten corrupted by the darkness, and Bun Bun looking out the darkness, and Pibby's all scared looking at Bun Bun. There's a lot of speculation as to why Bun Bun's eyes are green in that particular image. I personally think it's just a rendering mistake, but many people seem to think it was foreshadowing for a green light or something. I honestly can't talk about this a lot. The dislikement of Pibby. Pibby has tons and tons of haters. Like, there's a very vocal hatedom of Pibby and people who just hate Pibby fans for existing. Again, this shouldn't be really notable, just the fact that there are a ton of Pibby haters out there. /hug me. So Jake Neutron is probably the biggest name in the Pibby fandom. And besides his Friday Night Funkin' mods, which for some reason that doesn't get its own entry, he did a song to tie into his AU called /hug me. Many people seem to think that this song is supposed to be canon, but it's for his AU. And it's kind of, I guess the reason why this is on the iceberg is because it's really the only Pibby fan song that isn't directly attached to a Friday Night Funkin' mod. The victims and the survivors. Basically, a lot of people love to speculate on which characters in Cartoon Network or just in general survived and which ones got corrupted by the darkness, and they do fan art of it. My understanding is that it's basically random who survives and who doesn't, though there are lots of people who think there seems to be some sort of pattern. It's honestly really just personal preference which determines this sort of thing. F&F kids ruined Pibby, and this is probably the most cited reason that Pibby haters give for why they hate Pibby, which is that because kids who love Friday Night Funkin' love Pibby, that they ruined it for everyone else. And honestly, I never really got that response because honestly, I don't think you should let particularly immature fans ruin your enjoyment of something, especially since it was clearly something that Adult Swim and Dodge Greenlee didn't expect to happen. Like, it feels unfair to hate on something because the fans are immature. Like, you shouldn't hate on something because of fan behavior. Now we're at the bottom of the iceberg, it looks like. The casting call is often called the Pitch Bible, which is why it's listed as the Pitch Bible. The first Pibby leak came out on the same day as the trailer dropped to YouTube and people realized that there was interest in it. It was basically this casting call which listed a bunch of characters. It was basically a synopsis of the show and then a bunch of biographies of the characters. It was the first time we saw Melira's name, and it's where the name Beta Kid comes from. He's the sidekick who, I think his finalized name is Ally Boy, but in a lot of these early leaks, he's called Beta Kid. And a lot of lore that isn't otherwise made clear is explained in this. We also have the lines which are attached to the casting call. There are presumably lines for all 4 of these characters, Pibby, Bun Bun, Malira, and Alloy Boy. But the only ones whose lines are known are Alloy Boy and Bun Bun, and that's because some voice actor auditioned a year before the pilot came out. They were doing all the auditions online, like you sent your demo reels online, because this was during the COVID pandemic when it was really at its height. The Bun Bun lines were basically him saying a bunch of cute things and then insulting Pibby using internet slang. While Alloy Boy's lines are him talking about his relationship with Captain Platinum, I guess. He sort of talks about why he doesn't really want to be a sidekick, and is sort of trying to become his own person. The Darkness internet slang. So the Darkness internet slang is seen in the casting call. Basically, the Darkness, when it talks, it uses a whole lot of internet slang to insult Pibby. The implication being that the whole thing is a metaphor for how the internet ruins cartoons for children. This has definitely gotten a mixed reaction among Pibby fans. Some people think that it's just really cheesy that the Darkness says internet slang. Some people wish it was something that was taken a bit more seriously, that had a darker explanation. Fake leaks and release dates. I could make a whole video listing of fake Pibby leaks and release dates. In fact, I think I've been sent almost 100 fake Pibby leaks in total. But in general, there are people who love to edit wikis or send to me on Twitter or post in general stuff like fake screenshots, fake animatics, and fake release dates for when Pibby might come out. In general, unless it's one of the leaks that I mentioned in the earlier segment, just assume it's fake, because most of these have no evidence whatsoever. The trademarks were extended a couple months ago, back in June or July. Adult Swim and Cartoon Network extended all their trademarks for Pibby, which indicates that they might still be interested in greenlighting it. I think it says a whole lot about the lack of Pibby news out there that this is worth putting on the iceberg. The Darkness is a metaphor for cable and streaming. So basically what this fan theory is that the Darkness is a representation of how shows get canceled or screwed over on cable or streaming. Like every time a show gets canceled, it gets corrupted by the Darkness. And it's a very popular one because, especially at the time Pibby first came out, show cancellations were a very hot topic. Honestly, I don't buy this theory because in the original Pibby trailer, one of the characters they show is Craig from Craig of the Creek. And although as of now it's been canceled, at the time the trailer was made, it was still very much an ongoing show. So if the Darkness really was a metaphor for shows getting canceled, then why is Craig there? How the show might turn out. This is another one that I don't really understand is on this iceberg. Like, yeah, speculation exists. Woohoo. IMDb. So IMDb is one of the most common sources of fake Pibby leaks. There have been multiple cases where there have been fake release dates and even fake episode titles released on IMDb, though thankfully that's much less common now. The Void Theory. This one is a popular one with fans of the Amazing World of Gumball, and it basically assumes that the Darkness and the Void from the Amazing World of Gumball are the same thing. They also assume that Rob will be the main villain of the show behind and the creator of the Darkness somehow. I personally don't buy this theory because there's still the Gumball movie. And in general, I feel like the Darkness is this outside force that is kind of above the Void, even, if that makes sense. Like, if we're gonna bring the Void and Rob into this whole thing, we might as well bring Prismo and his time room into it too, and that would be a huge mess. Has Pibby been greenlit yet? That's a good question. Moving on. Pibby OCs. So there are tons and tons of Pibby fan characters out there. These usually are fan-made corrupted characters. Alternate versions of Pibby are also really popular. Sometimes you get alternate versions of Bun Bun, but alternate versions of Pibby are ones I see a lot. Or people just take their own OCs and make them survivors or victims. Like, every show has OCs, so just saying Pibby OCs in general isn't really that specific. Pibby was never that good of a concept. This is another common comment from Pibby haters, and it's basically the equivalent of saying, oh, Pibby was never good anyway. Like, if you don't like the idea, then just don't talk about it. Now we're below the iceberg. This layer is going to be scary. Episode credits. It's hard to tell what exactly that refers to, but I'm assuming that that's the sort of fake credits that appear when Pibby initially is transported out of her world and she's really confused by them. I should note that all of these names, except for Dodge Greenlee, are fake names. Some people seem to think they are real names, but I've looked up all those names before and they're fake. Behind the scenes, so several people who have worked on Pibby have put behind the scenes footage of how they animated it, and they basically showed all these assets. I think this is where we saw Rick before the original storyboard was leaked too, and those were confirmed real. And in general, these are some of the only official acknowledgements of Pibby, besides the trailer and the April Fool's special. Unikitty dead or alive? So many people are confused as to whether Unikitty got corrupted or not, because she's shown as corrupted in the poster that promotes the series trailer. But then in the trailer herself, she's a survivor. So no one really knows her status because it's sort of contradictory. In fact, at this point, I don't even know if she's going to appear in the show, since Warner Brothers lost the rights to make Lego movies and TV shows, and Universal now owns them. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't end up seeing Unikitty at all in the show. Pibby Ohio Yat Riz. So this is a genre of ironic meme where it's incomprehensible unless you're terminally online. But basically, everything that is considered cringe is kind of combined into these ironic sludge memes. And for some reason, Pibby just got caught up in them. To be honest, I don't really understand why. I mean, Pibby is a good thing. It is not cringe at all. I might as well say that Pizza Tower is good too, and I don't get why they're in those memes either. The coolest shit ever. This is paraphrasing, and not an actual quote, but this is a reference to a commonly mocked tweet by the Twitter account Trafon. The actual meme says, "This is seriously the coolest shit. It's so terrifying. What makes it all the more unsettling is it's the characters you know, too. Learning with Pibby needs to happen. I'll scream it to the rooftops. Adult Swim has a gold mine here." And for some reason, people just started making fun of this guy for expressing enthusiasm for Pibby. It's this ironic meme. Listen, I'm not going to pretend to understand these ironic memes. I honestly hate how people make fun of other people just for expressing enthusiasm over something. Welch grape juice 90s commercial. So that grape juice commercial you see in the Pibby trailer is a parody of a real Welch's grape juice commercial. I found out about this a couple months back, and the proof is once again in the leaked storyboards, which show edited images from that commercial. They changed it into the final to avoid trademark infringement. Unknown locations from the pilot. There are several locations in the pilot that we don't really know where they are. Like, there are a couple of these forest scenes. There's also this 1920s black and white looking city street background. And no one really knows what those are. There's a lot of speculation, but it's honestly quite hard to tell. San Diego Comic-Con. Okay, so this is partially my fault, but every time there's a huge event where Adult Swim could make announcements, there's a lot of speculation as to whether Adult Swim will make Pibby announcements there. The most common places of speculation for Pibby announcements are San Diego Comic-Con, as that's when a lot of companies reveal their big projects in animation. So it would make sense for Adult Swim to reveal Pibby stuff during San Diego Comic-Con, but they haven't done that so far. Adult Swim Festival should be here too, because that's Adult Swim's annual event where they do announcements and stuff, but it's an Adult Swim specialized event. Game Tunes. So Game Tunes is a content farm. I'm surprised that they're the only content farm out there, given that there are quite a few YouTube Kids content farms that make stuff about Pibby. But Game Tunes did a mini series, which is basically a crossover with all of their series about video games, where it got corrupted by the darkness and player teamed up with Pibby to stop the darkness. And there's a lot of Friday Night Funkin' stuff, a lot of corrupted versions of popular video game characters. It's basically learning with Pibby, but with content farm stuff. Melira Rule 34. She's a furry character. Of course that exists. Ironic Pibby memes on Twitter. I mean, that's kind of redundant with Pibby, Ohio Gat Riz. Now the water is starting to get even deeper. Pibby is a metaphor for drug addiction and Planned Parenthood. Pibby is the deformed version of the aliens in Daft Punk's Interstellar 5555. Mordecai Rigby started all of this. These three, I'm just gonna put all together because honestly, I'm kind of half convinced that the person who made the iceberg just made these theories up because I've never heard them anywhere else. Warner Brothers canceled Cartoon Network shows to hype up Pibby. This was a fan theory that existed when the HBO Max purge started. They assumed that the show cancellations weren't real and they were just a publicity stunt for Pibby, but that's just not how cancellations work. So a lot of people made fun of them for it and ultimately made Pibby fans look bad. Pibby Rule 34. It should be a given that porn exists for this. GTA 6 or Pibby, which one is going to be released first? Which refers to how long it seems to be taking for Pibby to come out. Though I should note that it's pretty normal for a show to take 5 years between the pilot and the actual show getting released. That was the amount of time between pilot and release for OKKO and Infinity Train, so it makes sense for Pibby. Pibby was originally made for Cartoonito, so this is more of an in-universe fan theory that in the universe of Pibby, Pibby is a Cartoonito show that aired on Cartoon Network's preschool block. It's pretty self-explanatory. Dodge is not under NDA. Many people seem to speculate whether Dodge Greenlee is still under an NDA or not. I personally think he's still under an NDA because if he wasn't under an NDA, he would probably make another announcement about Pibby already, but he hasn't in over a year and he hasn't said whether it's canceled or not. Hearts of Iron 4 Pibby Invasion. This is literally all I could find when looking it up. Pibby will be revealed this Halloween. They said last year, they said this year, so it's honestly hard to tell. But Halloween is around the anniversary of Pibby. The Pibby trailer first came out on October 30th. So it makes sense since it's a horror thing to reveal Pibby around Halloween, but so far that hasn't happened yet. Pibby Hits the Gritty. This is a rather infamous video that Jake Neutron made. He promised to animate Pibby doing the gritty if something were to happen on April Fools of 2023. Adult Swim ended up not doing anything, but that's when the animatic leaks started showing up, so he held his end of the bargain and animated Pibby doing the gritty as sort of this ironic thing. But later I shared it as my favorite Pibby meme, and a ton of people made fun of me for doing so, not realizing that the meme was meant to be this sort of tongue-in-cheek, ironic thing. Logo kids. Yes, kids who are into logos seem to love Pibby too. I guess here are some thumbnails of videos made by kids of corrupted logos and Pibby. It's at the very bottom of the iceberg. Hot take, this shouldn't be at the very bottom of the iceberg because this is a very common fan theory. The show is a big FU to Cartoon Network and the animation industry. And that's like baby's first Pibby fan theory, is a jab at Cartoon Network, and the hole in the darkness is meant to be the entire animation industry screwing shows over. I know this is a disappointing way to end the iceberg, but that's where the end of the iceberg is. And that's the Pibby Iceberg. I know this isn't the best video, but I hope you still all enjoyed learning. I will probably make another iceberg video if a Pibby series ever comes out, because if a Pibby series ever comes out, there's definitely going to be a more substantial iceberg. But in the meantime, I'll still be making fan content.